Respect.
Yeah.
Okay, so quickly, just again, reminder, right? We don't meet on Monday, right? So everything that I've got up on the board here is going to be due a week from today. So you're going to read Chapter 5 in Writing Analytically, and you're going to do Assignment 3 on page 114. Now, if we turn to that assignment, it is essentially a comparison assignment, right? So what you're going to be doing is looking at this list of possible topics, right? You're going to choose something from this list, and the two items you're comparing, you're going to look for significant difference, right? What do you think is the most important or telling or interesting difference between these things, right? Or for some unexpected similarity, right? I expected these things to be different, but they're actually alike in this very specific and interesting way, right? And you're going to use that as the basis for an analysis. Now, one thing that I do want to note here, right, and I think like we're going to talk a little bit about the homework assignment from last time today as well, and about that, we're going to dig into that article a little more deeply, because I do think there are some issues that are useful for a class like that to dissect in this, to dissect in that article. But the one thing that I do want to point to there is like the way it analyzes, fandom and emotional involvement with a particular thing, right? So what I'm going to suggest here is that you don't choose a topic that you feel a very, very strong emotional attachment to, right? Why might that be? Why might I want you to choose a topic you feel a little more neutral about? Exactly, you're not biased. It's going to be easier to step back and look at it objectively, right? Because what I really want you analyzing is the content of the thing, right? The rhetorical content of the thing, not how you feel about the thing, right? So, just as a quick review here, right, of what you should be doing with each assignment, right? So first thing you want to remember to do is to use descriptive language rather than evaluative language, right? Use words that describe the thing itself in concrete terms, right? Sensory terms, not words that tell me how you feel about the object or how interesting you find it, right? All right. Remember also that no matter what else you are doing, you are also looking for patterns of repetition and contrast. All right. What ideas does your chosen text or subject seem to group together? Like, remember when we looked at the Mayflower Compact last time, right? There were those different strands of religious language and political language, right? So yeah, look for concepts that get grouped together, and then look for things that seem to be sort of put together as opposites, like put against each other as opposites, right? So we'll pick some examples out of the article that we're going to look at today, right? To give you a better sense of what you're doing here. Now, third, right, you are always going to want to think about what the text assumes to be true about its subject. And what is implied about the subject, right? That is, what is suggested but left unsaid. So let's just call up quickly on the screen here the essay that y'all were supposed to have read for the last homework assignment, and we'll kind of go through a bit of it, and we'll pick it apart, and we'll kind of I'll show you what I wanted done with this, and this will help you all going forward, right? Now, one other thing that I noticed. Now, I did tell you to focus on a single paragraph of the essay, right? Did I ever tell y'all not to read the whole article? That you only needed to read that one paragraph, right? And it seemed like some of you had ignored completely ignored the rest of the article and only focused on that one paragraph, right? It seemed like you'd only read the one paragraph because you were clearly kind of not quite grasping what the article was actually arguing. So remember, as we've said before, right, that meaning is always contextual. Right? A single paragraph extracted from an article doesn't mean anything on its own, right? Or means something different on its own than it does in the context of the whole article, right? And taking something out of context tends to lead us into sometimes honest thinking errors and sometimes dishonest thinking errors, right? This is something that people do in politics, for example, all the time, right? You know, somebody will be making a speech, they'll say something, and somebody will take one sentence from that speech and, you know, record it and sort of blast it over the internet or over TV or ads or whatever, right? And that one sentence from the speech will often not reflect the actual content of the speech, but will get people angry at that person, right? So to give you an example of this, early in the Obama administration, there was an official who worked for the Department of Agriculture, a black woman, who was giving a talk at a luncheon. And she had said at that talk that she had had difficulty working with a particular white farmer. So that got recorded and sent all over the place to all these various media outlets, and people were trying to make the argument that this woman is a racist and needs to be fired. Now the problem was that they were taking that one sentence out of the speech and not the content of the whole speech, in which she talked about how they managed to find ways to work together and build bridges with each other, right, despite the fact that they were initially suspicious of one another. So taking that statement out of context changed its meaning, right? So context always matters. So let's just go through some of the important parts of the essay, particularly some of the parts that you guys chose to analyze, and we'll see what we can do with it. So the title up here actually tells us something about the argument that the piece is making, right? So what's the subtitle up here? What does it say?
How the mindset of an irritating webcomic infected criticism.
So is the article really about the comic? What is it about?
Irritating webcomic criticism towards the
Yeah, it's about the effect the comic has had on cultural criticism, right? Or at least how the mindset that produced the comic has had an effect on criticism, right? So the comic itself, right, which we see described in the first two paragraphs here, right? So some webcomics are born irritating and some are made. In 2016, cartoonist Adam Ellis created an unassuming comic named Shh, which would go on to be, impossibly, both. Shh plays out in 3 fateful panels. In the first, 2 men sit on a couch. One is making fun of the other for watching sports. In the second, our sports fan, uttering the titular shh, has clamped his enemy's mouth shut. And then in the third, having ensured silence, he utters 4 words, let people enjoy things. If we were using one of those little pain measurement scales to log how annoying this comic is, 0 being no reaction at all and 10 being a song you can't remember stuck in your head, shh, in its original form ranks, at the very worst, 2 out of 10. It's a little smug, but it's basically fine. In a happier world, it would have slid down into the great content void, and that would be the end of it. Instead, however, some world historical monster cropped out the last 2 panels, which in turn became a standalone reaction image. Let People Enjoy Things went from one piece of an, again, only mildly annoying comic to a manifesto for a certain type of fan that gets very, very angry if somebody out there isn't enjoying things. By late 2019, Ellis was so fed up with his own creation that he made a new comic in which he took out into the woods and shot it. It was, however, too late. So, what is the comic being, like, what use is the author of this piece making of this web comic here? What are they using the web comic to do? What's the purpose of starting this with a description of this web comic?
Kind of like analyze one of the worst comics that like how he tried to get rid of it and stuff.
Okay, well, yeah. So it is saying here the author was annoyed enough by the response, right, that he wanted to erase it.
Yeah.
But by the third paragraph, what has changed in the way we're talking about the comic? Are we still really talking about the comic here?
I was talking about like comics in general, I guess, or like the idea of let people enjoy things.
Yeah, so he's transitioning here to the idea now, right? To that let people enjoy things idea that he thinks has infected cultural criticism more broadly. So what's the purpose then of the comic in all of this? What does the comic do?
Leading to the idea of let people enjoy things.
Yeah, it gives you like a kind of concrete thing to hook onto in the introduction, right? The comic itself is just a jumping off point, right, for the bigger idea that he's going to discuss. Now, we also have 2 key words in these first couple paragraphs that are going to repeat throughout the essay, right? Enjoy and fan. So let's think about what we tend to mean in casual conversation when we talk about enjoyment or when we call someone a fan. What does it mean to enjoy something?
You find pleasure in it.
Yeah, to take pleasure in it, right? Yeah, exactly. And what is a fan? If you're a fan of something, what does that mean?
Something you support. You favor it.
Yeah, you support or favor some particular team or musician or TV show or whatever, right? Now, do we tend to regard someone as a fan as someone who's a little bit more intense in their admiration than the casual observer?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, there's always a level of intensity implied by fan, right? So, as we go through this, what I want to try to interrogate here is whether the author here means quite the same things by enjoyment and by fan as we usually do in casual conversation, right? So I don't have a problem with letting people enjoy things for what it's worth. Where if I do have a problem, it's temperamental, not intellectual. When I think about the dynamic in the comic, what I consider mostly is that many people find the experience of watching movies with me unbearable. A friend once told me that if I left an anticipated movie with a list of complaints, she was going to walk away from me. If somebody mentions a show we both happen to watch, I'll often start saying something like I had issues, before reminding myself they probably don't actually want to talk about the show, they just wanted to mention it. People don't buy me books or movies because one of the last times somebody did, it became one of my most hated books of all time. Let people enjoy things is partly just about figuring out when it is and isn't appropriate to get into a disagreement, which, for conflict-enjoying people, is a lifelong process. There's a right time and a right place, and maybe most importantly, the right companions for me out there. My ideal way of watching a movie involves pausing it a lot to argue and then arguing about it afterward. This is how I enjoy things. To many other people, this is hell. Not even because they don't like arguing. The pausing alone is a deal breaker. And that's really fine. When in somebody else's home, or their metaphorical home, like their Twitter mentions, play by their rules. So, what is the author's strategy in these two? What is the author doing in these two paragraphs? What are they explaining here?
His reasoning behind, like, let people enjoy things if he has a problem with it. Or I guess, like, why people enjoy things.
Okay. Why is this part so personal? Do you think? Why does it rely so much on I here? Like this is what I do. These are my habits. What are they trying to demonstrate here?
Relatability, I guess.
Let's think about it in terms of the key words we've already picked out. What about themselves is the author describing here?
How he views things.
More specifically. Let me put it to you this way. Can this author enjoy a movie or a book or a TV show by just passively absorbing it? Yeah, what they're describing here is how they enjoy things, right? They enjoy things in part by picking them apart and arguing about them. But how do other people often react to that?
They don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Other people try to shut it down, right?
Yeah.
Or just refuse to go to a movie with this person to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And the author concedes down here, right, when in somebody else's home, or their metaphorical home, like their Twitter mentions, play by their rules, right? So it's like, okay, so if I go to someone else's house to watch a movie, and we're pausing, we keep pausing it to argue about it all the time because that's what I want to do, right? That's rude. I shouldn't be doing that in someone else's home. But the problem is, for a small but vocal number of people online, any opinion they dislike is essentially being expressed by somebody in their home. Let people enjoy things as a way of saying learn basic conversational dynamics is a banal but true statement. But in practice, let people enjoy things means something else. It is rude or inappropriate to dislike something. And it's this overstep that I do, in fact, have a problem with. So how does the author seem to assume other people are interpreting the phrase, let people enjoy things?
That you don't like what they like, they didn't mean about them.
Yeah.
Or like the way he is enjoying things is different from most people, so they don't take it as if like he likes what they're doing. They take it effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even to broaden it out beyond personal dynamics, right? He's describing this as a kind of culture-wide phenomenon that for a certain number of people, letting them enjoy something, right, means never expressing any negative opinions about the thing that they enjoy, right? Or pointing out any flaws in the thing that they enjoy. So, enjoy means to take pleasure in, right? But how does the author here seem to think most people interpret this word enjoy then? In addition to taking pleasure in something, what element gets added to it?
It's like almost like control things, like let people do things the way they want to do it.
Okay, there's an element of control, right? Right, you can't say anything bad about this thing because I like it, right? But if we look again at the way the author here says they enjoy things, right? Through criticism and analysis and argument. What is he suggesting about the way they let people enjoy things? People enjoy things. Maybe it'll help if we kind of look a little bit further on, right? We see some of the further points the author makes here, right? So, not letting people not enjoy things has a rich history. But we can start the clock for our purposes in July 2012, when Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises saw its Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter score plummet from 100% fresh to, brace yourself, 99%. Does everybody understand what Rotten Tomatoes is and how it works? Okay, yeah, so essentially Rotten Tomatoes is a website that aggregates both user movie reviews and professional movie reviews, right? And they just assign a movie a number based on how positive those reviews are. The reaction to this development was so negative that Rotten Tomatoes had to shut down user comments, though, as one of the critics so singled out, Marshall Fine, pointed out in an interview, nobody who was so angry at his negative review had actually seen the movie yet, right? Now, this is unstated here, but it's because at the time, the movie had not yet been released to the public, right? Only professional critics had seen it. So the users who are complaining about Marshall Fine's negative review have not yet seen the movie. They couldn't have seen the movie. Fine wasn't bothered by the negative attention, or if he was, he kept his cool in public. Furthermore, reading Fine's review today, it's not even really wrong about the movie. But why were all these people so angry over a negative review of a movie that none of them had actually seen? That was the real puzzle. So, what's weird about what happens here in this paragraph? What's strange about the phenomenon that the author's describing?
All the people that haven't seen the movie got behind the idea that it was a good movie because of the 100%, and then when it went to 99%, they're like, "Oh, you're wrong because it's only one person." Yeah,
well, are they necessarily going like? Let's think about it. Let's think about this idea of the fan as well here, right? So, have any of you seen The Dark Knight Rises? Do you even know like what it's about? Okay, so who's the main character in the movie? It's a Batman movie. Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, it's a Batman movie.
Maybe they were like mad about the negative review just because they were such big fans of Batman. They didn't want to hear anything negative bad about it.
Yes. Either they're huge Batman fans or they're huge Christopher Nolan fans, right?
Of course.
Personally, I think Christopher Nolan's movies are bloated and pretentious. Interstellar was 2.5 hours of my life that I'll never get back.
That movie sucks.
The only good thing about it was that I drank too much Mr. Pibb and had to keep going to the bathroom, so I missed significant chunks of it, which was probably for the best. But I digress. Anyway, I have no problem expressing negative opinions about movies other people like, right? But yeah, so we might also want to think about this drop from 100% to 99%, right? What does 100% fresh represent
everybody who liked the review liked it.
Yeah, so that 100% number represents perfection, right?
Yeah. And there's like, I know from Rotten Tomatoes, like there's not like any movie, like a lot of movies have never even had 100% before.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, like most of the highest rated movies on Rotten Tomatoes, like, classic films
Yeah.
that are regarded as, like the high points in the history of cinema often have like an 85% rating, right? But yeah, this 100% is pristine, perfect goodness, right? And then what happens when it drops to 99%?
It's not perfect anymore.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
still really good, right?
Yeah, it takes
90
away a lot of the value just because of one review.
Yeah. And so these people who love this thing intensely, right, and want other people to respect their intense love of this thing and share it, get mad when not everybody does, right? We can fast forward to 2017, when video game critic Jim Stephanie Sterling gave Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild a score of 7 out of 10, which might sound positive, but not in the world of video game reviews, where scores are so inflated that Grand Theft Auto 5 getting a 9 out of 10 was perceived as a politically motivated takedown. Sterling's review received such intense backlash that their website was taken down thanks to DDoS attacks, because, much like Fine, they had caused the game's aggregate rating to drop by a percentage point. So, what context are we getting about the bigger culture of reviewing from this paragraph?
Just one review can change a lot about how it's perceived by like the regular population.
Okay, yeah, that one review does change a game or a movie's overall rating, right? So, there are, sites like Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic that just kind of aggregate reviews and assign a number, right? But what else is it saying about what does it say up here about the broader culture, specifically here in video game reviews? 7 out of 10 doesn't sound to us like a bad score, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 70%, that's passing, right? Yeah, yeah.
But it's saying like it's inflated. So like Grand Theft
Yeah.
Auto, a lot of people like it, but it's not the best video game. Like,
Sure.
They got a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I was in my 20s when the first Grand Theft Auto games came out, and playing the game made me kind of uncomfortable. It's like the things that the morally suspect things it asks you to do. I mean, yeah, like I get,
Like, real gamers don't really, like, they think GTA is just like whatever, because it's not really a real game to them, because it's so,
yeah.
so that's probably why they're so mad about it.
Yeah, but they're intense fans of that game, right? Who, you gave my favorite game a 9 out of 10, right? Therefore, the Twitter mobs are coming for you, right?
Yeah.
So, giving the Legend of Zelda game a 7 out of 10, right, in a field where scores are already inflated, where people are already giving games better numbers than they deserve, right, becomes insulting to Legend of Zelda fans. Now, why might video game reviews be so inflated, given what else we've been talking about? What might be causing this culture of review inflation? Giving games better numbers than they actually merit.
Yeah, like a lot of video games and a lot of movies, it's not like if the first one's good, they're gonna have ones after it. So like if
Sure.
you just completely cancel the first one, it doesn't really have any chance of continuing and making billions of dollars.
Yeah, but I mean, by this, they've been making Legend of Zelda games since I was in the 5th grade. Right? This is not a franchise that's going to go away or die, right?
Okay.
That's going to be made or broken by one negative review. But if, think about the broader content of the article here, right? And what it's saying about reviewing generally. Why do people get very mad at Jim Stephanie Sterling for giving it a comparatively low review, right? But what's happening in criticism that's making 7 out of 10 a low review? Why is this inflation of scores happening?
I think one reason is because a lot of people don't really like review it or like how the movie or how the video game is. They'll just like pick out one thing. Like a girl might like watch Batman and be like, oh, we saw it, I'll give it a 10 out of 10. And just for like stupid things like that, but
Mhm.
not actually a good review, like how it was made.
Okay. But again, I'm trying to get us to think of this in terms of these key ideas of enjoyment and fandom, right? Why might a reviewer not want to give a new video game a score lower than 10 out of 10?
People won't buy it. They won't get any profit from
Well, does the reviewer care if people buy the game?
it. No.
Think about what just happened in the last paragraph of the Batman movie.
They're not a fan
What's that?
of it. They're a fan of it or not a fan of it, so they're gonna give it either good or bad.
And they don't want people to like attack them.
Yes, exactly, right? That's what's going on here, right? Reviews become inflated and non-confrontational and really kind of non-critical because people are afraid of getting piled on by the fans, right? As we see happen in both of these examples here, right? That even a mildly negative review sparks this enormous backlash from fan culture. So fast forward again now to 2021. Siddhant Andlaka is mysteriously replaced as IGN's recapper of the Disney Plus show Loki after he gave one episode a critical review. But it's not so mysterious if you spend a little time browsing the hundreds of replies to IGN's official tweet. I'm honestly just confused as to why this person was giving the assignment of reviewing the show, goes one reply. There's clearly some sort of predetermined distaste happening here. Most of the replies are from small fry Twitter accounts, with followers frequently only in the double digits. They're more remarkable for their numbers than any given person's influence. And I think a thing to note here also is what Adlaka was writing here for Loki, right? Or for IGN, right? Is he writing reviews of the show? What's his job supposed to be? Recapper, yeah.
What's that mean?
Okay, so a recap of a movie or a TV show is basically just a summary of what happened, right?
You know, like at the beginning of Netflix, you like start a show.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah, or like, you know, there are all these, you know, websites, you know, like if you missed a show or you don't feel like watching through a whole season or something, that they'll have all these, you know, recaps of episodes, right? This is
Okay.
what happened on episode blah, blah, blah. So a recap by its very nature, right, is not critical, right?
It's just a summary.
It's just a summary, exactly.
Gotcha.
And the fact that this recapper introduced something vaguely critical into a summary initiates this huge backlash, right? So what seems to be thus far the basic argument of the piece?
If you're going to be a recapper, you have to be positive about the review or the
Mhm.
recap. And
Well,
not,
okay. So reviewers recap, like, so even people who write reviews or recaps, right? Yeah, that the power of fan culture, right? And the power of this idea that you should just let people enjoy things, right? Meaning you should let them enjoy it completely uncritically, right? Is making reviewing and criticism worse, right? Because people become too afraid to anger the fan groups, right? So one of the reasons I wanted to kind of just work through this a little bit, right, was because it was clear that some of you were kind of struggling with what the essay was on about, right? And so a couple of things that I think would help generally, right? When you're trying to read something, whether it's a shorter piece or a longer piece, right? Slow down.
So when we're like reading this and you say like focus on one paragraph, we should like read it all and take everything into consideration, but just
Yes.
focus on one thing.
Exactly. Read the whole thing slowly first and make sure you get the point the larger article is making, right? And then select a paragraph that you think is a particularly interesting example, right, of what the article is doing to make that point. So that's what you should be doing when you're looking at a longer piece like this, right? The other thing, again, as a, slowing, when I talk about slowing down, right? Slow down, take notes on what you're reading, and do not skim. Reread, go back and reread things if you have to. And like that's not just for this class, right? For anything that you're reading, particularly anything that's remotely complicated, right? If you skim, you're going to miss things and you're going to make mistakes, right? And I know that, we're all being pulled in dozens of different directions, right? That most of you, I'm assuming, are taking at least 4 classes, yes? That, some of you have sports and jobs and family commitments on top of that, right? But the single most important thing you can do to better understand what's going on in all of your classes is slow down and take notes when you read, right? Whatever the course is. And in fact, let's just kind of take a minute here. What do you notice I've got all over my book here?
Notes.
Yeah, I just scribble notes in the margins, right? That is it's proven to be one of the most effective ways to read and to get something out of your reading, right? Write directly on what it is that you're reading. Write questions, write notes, write ideas, right next to whatever it was that sparked them, right? Because then you're physically engaging with the text while you're reading it. Now, plus, then your note is right there next to the thing you were thinking about when you made it. If you rented your books, this becomes a little bit more problematic, right? Because you don't own the book. But you can always write in pencil and erase it before you return it, right? Or you can use sticky notes. But yeah, I would highly recommend writing in the book, right on the text. And for something like this, if you have enough, I know that they charge you for printouts, which is bullshit. But if you can print something like this out and read it, you will probably be able, and you can take notes on it, you will probably be able to get more out of it than if you are simply trying to read it on the screen. There is some research, which has been challenged, it's kind of the jury is still out on it, that suggests that we don't read things as closely on a screen as we do in print. All right, so let's just leave this aside for the moment. Now, one of the common argumentative strategies.
Can I write on this?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Anything that I give you in class, you're free to write on. Okay, so one of the most common assignments that you'll receive in any kind of class is the good old-fashioned summary and compare contrast, right? Now, given what we were talking about with the article for the homework, What's potentially problematic about a simple summary? What does a simple summary typically not do?
Like, it doesn't analyze, it just kind of gives like a recap.
Yeah, exactly. Just typically no analysis. It's just point-by-point description. Of what happened, right? Or a point-by-point description of whatever you've been looking at or reading. Now, you can actually make a summary more analytical. You can do so by being selective in choosing what to summarize. Right, so usually if we're just trying to summarize the whole thing globally, right, then we're going to try to cram in as much as we can, and we're not going to think very much about the ideas contained therein, right? If you are summarizing selectively, right, what you are doing is choosing a particular theme or pattern in order to explain its significance. Right? So the process of selection is itself analytical because you're having to cut away everything that's not relevant to the pattern you've chosen. And then that gets you closer to being able to make an argument about this particular thing. Right? It's like, okay, like I've already picked out this particular theme I think is important. That'll help me make an argument for its significance, right? So let's try this with the handout that I've just given you. Right? So these are two short passages from The Hobbit. I use The Hobbit a lot. So let's first let's read the first paragraph together, and then the second. And what I'd like you to try to do is write a selective summary briefly of the two passages, right? You're going to pick some particular theme or pattern you see in these passages that you think is significant or interesting, right? All right, so the first one, right? So they laughed and sang in the trees, and pretty fair nonsense, I dare say you think it. Not that they would care. They would only laugh all the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course. Soon Bilbo caught glimpses of them as the darkness deepened. He loved elves, though he seldom met them, but he was a little frightened of them too. Dwarves don't get on well with them. Even decent enough dwarves like Thorin and his friends think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think, or get annoyed with them. For some elves tease them and laugh at them, and most of all at their beards. Second paragraph. There in the shadows on a large flat stone sat a tremendous goblet with a huge head, and armed goblins were standing round him carrying the axes and the bent swords that they use. Now goblins are cruel, wicked, and bad-hearted. They make no beautiful things, but they make many clever ones. They can tunnel and mine as well as any but the most skilled dwarves when they take the trouble, though they are usually untidy and dirty. Hammers, axes, swords, daggers, pickaxes, tongs, and also instruments of torture they make very well, or get other people to make to their design, prisoners and slaves that have to work till they die for want of air and light. They did not hate dwarves especially, no more than they hated everybody and everything, and particularly the orderly and prosperous. In some parts, wicked dwarves had even made alliances with them. But they had a special grudge against Thorin's people. And anyway, goblins don't care who they catch, as long as it is done smart and secret, and the prisoners are not able to defend themselves. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is pretty much the first thing we usually do here, right? Look for patterns of repetition. Right, look for words that seem to refer to similar concepts, right? And explain to me what the logical connection is here. Explain to me what they all refer to.
Are
And
we,
just take-
sorry, are we relating both these paragraphs like together?
yeah, just read them both
Okay.
together for now. Yep.
Um,
Okay, so, once you have got your selected pattern here, right, the strand you want to talk about, and it looks like some of you have already anticipated that I was going to ask this, right? I want you to take the next 5 minutes and write a summary, right, not of the two paragraphs as a whole, right, but just a summary describing your selected strand, right? Explaining the logic of your selection here, right? And thinking about why it might be significant. Take another 2 minutes. Bless you.
Thank you.
Okay, so who is willing to share what they wrote? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I said these two paragraphs further explain the relationships and unsaid hierarchy of the three species, goblins, dwarfs, and elves, within the book The Hobbit.
Okay.
None of these groups interact well together because they are all so different. Some strands stated that support this pattern are dwarves don't get on well and no more hated everybody and everything. These descriptions reveal the complex relationship each one has with each other. All three of these species are unique and different in both looks and nature. However, all share a connection of belonging to the same community.
Okay, that's an interesting thing to focus on there. You chose that single thing. It's like, okay, that it looks like none of these groups get along with each other, right? So yeah, that's good. Shelby, did you have a hand up? You did not? Are you willing to read what you wrote?
I basically was like, I haven't finished, but I basically like was writing about what she said about how it's like describing the different types of like creatures within the story and how
Okay.
they're so different from each other, but in the end they're alike too in the same ways because they're both, I guess mean to others and they torture others, but in their own ways.
Okay, yeah, so you notice, yes. And I think one thing you've got there is, there is a pattern, like not just of not getting along, but also a pattern of a little bit of cruelty in here, right? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, who had a hand up here? I saw somebody.
I kind of like piggyback on them, but I would say like the dwarves and the elves, they like get along better than like, they get along more than like the goblins and like the dwarves, so like it's all like a separate thing.
Okay, so there's like a matter of degree there. If we look at like the way the elves' attitudes towards the dwarves are described, what's the worst thing the elves do to dwarves? Yeah, they tease them and laugh at them, right? They make fun of them, right? Which isn't particularly nice, but how are the goblins' relations with dwarves described?
Yeah, they don't like Quirin's group of dwarves particularly, but they don't really like anybody.
Yeah, they don't like anybody, but they have a special grudge against this group of dwarves, right? Okay, good. Anybody else? Okay, so what I'd like you all to do now is sort of further pick apart that summary that you wrote, right? And I want you to look for points of comparison and contrast in it, right? So what you're looking for when you want to compare or contrast things, right, are not just what's different and what's the same, right? But you want to look for things that are similar or different along a particular theme, right? So like you're looking at, you were looking at relationships between different species here, right? That's a theme you can kind of continue on, right? Trying to pull that out. So the things you want to look for are significant difference, right? Not just difference, but difference that actually seems kind of important, interesting, and meaningful. So difference that has kind of some level of complexity to it. Right, not just like this one's red and this one's blue, right? You also want to look for unexpected similarity. Right? Is there a way in which these things are the same that you found surprising? And I would say do a little bit more work with the paragraphs, pull both apart, right? Look for differences, look for similarities, and then choose one to focus on, right? Either one significant difference or one unexpected similarity. And it sounded like given the summaries you guys wrote, you're already, some of you are already on your way to something here. So just, keep trying to build on that. Okay, so let's kind of pause here for a second. So I'm going to start us off with an example here, and then if any of you came up with something similar, feel free to add to it. So if we're looking at the description of the elves in the first paragraph here, right? How well do we see the elves? Like, what sense do we get of what an elf looks like from this? Do we get one?
Not really a physical one.
Yeah, we don't really get a good physical sense of what an elf looks like, right? What do we get instead?
Just like they're childish, the way they act.
Okay, yeah, we get stuff about their behavior, right? What do we see of them? Or what does anyone see of them? Yeah, just a glimpse in the darkness, right? All right, we're told that, Bilbo seldom met with them, right? And how do we first know about their presence at the beginning of this paragraph? They laughed and sang in the trees, right? Yeah, so we hear them, we don't really see them. So the picture that this gives us of elves, right, is kind of elusive and mysterious. Now, when we look at the goblins in the paragraph that follows, do we get a sense of what goblins look like?
Yes.
Yeah, we get a much more concrete physical description, right? We know that one of them has a huge head and is sitting on a rock, right? We know that, we see the weapons that they're carrying. That where are they positioned in relation to the narrator? Or to the character, who's the perspective character here.
Large flash and shadows.
Yep.
In the shadows.
They're in the shadows and the large flat stones, but they're also standing around him, right? So the goblins, yeah, they are in the shadows. But we get a physical description, right? Large heads and things like that. The weapons that they're carrying, and that they are directly threatening the perspective character, right? They're standing around him. So goblins rather than being elusive and mysterious, seem to represent a direct threat, right? They're not just, something that's a little confusing that you see out of the corner of your eye and you maybe hear in the trees. There's something standing right in front of you with a sword ready to stab you. So, what's similar about the two descriptions, though? There is an unexpected similarity buried in here.
Whereas elves, you don't get a physical description. They're more like heard, not seen.
Yeah.
Goblins are also like kind of hidden within the shadows.
Okay, yeah, they're both in darkness, right?
So like the sense of hiding.
Darkness and shadows. And we know that the goblins also tunnel in mine. They live underground, right? Whereas the elves hang out in the trees. So that's a kind of interesting contrast, right? The things that live above ground, like way above ground, are actually harder to see than the things that live underground, right? Now, what about the reactions that the narrator describes to both of them? How does Bilbo feel about the elves?
He liked them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he loves them,
He loved elves, though he seldom met them.
but he was scared.
But he's a little frightened of them too, right? So I think the unexpected similarity here is that both of these creatures are described as being frightening, right? Being scary, but for different reasons. And then what I would do to take this a little further, which I won't right now because we're about out of time, is try to unpack further the ways in which both of these creatures are described as frightening, right? What is frightening about them? Now, in the case of the elves, it is probably due to the fact that you can't really see them, right? They kind of flit in and out of the trees. You can hear them laughing at you, but they're never right there in front of you. Whereas with the goblins, it's clearly related to a kind of direct physical threat and a reputation for cruelty, right? Okay, so does anybody have any questions about anything? All right, so, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so for the next assignment,
Uh-huh.
this is basically what we're gonna be doing?
Yeah,
Or-
essentially what we just did here is essentially what you're going to be doing.
Okay.
But yeah, you'll choose one of the topics listed in the assignment.
So we're running like a summary, basically, comparing the documents.
Yeah, what you're doing is a compare and contrast, more so than a summary. But yeah, you're going to follow the same process, right? You know, you're going to look for some significant pattern, right, where you can find a contrast. And then you're going to look for either an interesting and meaningful difference or some kind of unexpected similarity, right? So for example, with the elves and the goblins here, the unexpected similarity is that they're both frightening, right?
So even the ones that are, the assignment that's due tonight, I know it's about explaining like implications,
Yes.
but it could kind of be related to this in the same way, like there's underlying themes.
Absolutely, yeah. And essentially, what like every assignment is asking you to do the things you did for the last one plus one more thing, usually, right? So you're going to be following the same process for each assignment, and then kind of just adding something extra to it. And then that's how we're going to build up to writing longer papers.
Cool.
All right. Other questions?
So for now, I'm just sending the scratch work to you through email.
Yeah, if you have, if the scratch work isn't coming through, just send it to me via email. And if you had a note on your feedback for the last time that said, "Where's your scratch work?" and you did do the scratch work, just email it to me. I'll adjust your grade for